Hi, and welcome to SPED Homeschool Conversations. My name is Peggy Ployer, and we want to welcome you to our broadcast. I have a very special guest to introduce you to tonight, and her name is Faith Berens, and she is one of the Struggling Learner Specialists with HSLDA. So, welcome, Faith.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. I know we already have a couple of viewers on, and I'm expecting quite a few more as the evening continues. We've got a whole hour to talk about frequently asked questions that have come into HSLDA that you answer on a regular basis about homeschooling a teen through high school that has a disability. And I remember when I first started and how fearful I was. And just so many questions that parents have about that. It's a daunting thing. So I would like you to just start out by introducing yourself, what you do with HSLDA, what does a Struggling Learner Specialist do, kind of your background and how you got into that. And I know you homeschool too, and just maybe some of your background. I know that you've struggled with a learning disability yourself. So kind of like to get an overview of that so our audience can get to know you and to understand where you're coming from and your background. And I think it's really neat just how God has used everything in your life to get you where you are right now and to use those gifts to help so many parents.
Sure. Okay. That's a lot. So welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to be here with Peggy and with everybody. So I'm Faith Berens, and I work about 16 to 20 hours a week from home for Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I'm one of their special needs consultants or struggling learner consultants. Sometimes we refer to ourselves as the mom consultants because all of us in our department, we homeschool our children as well as work part-time for them, and that basically entails answering phone calls and emails as well as speaking at conferences and just trying to equip parents to homeschool and to stay the course. We help them with all kinds of questions getting started. Of course, HSLDA helps with the legal aspect of homeschooling, record keeping, you name it. We're there to review test reports that families may have. If you've had your child formally diagnosed or assessed, sometimes we'll review those test reports to make teaching recommendations or curricula recommendations, therapy recommendations, things like that. So that's a little bit about what I do for them, but most of my time is spent with my two kiddos. I have an 8-year-old son, Hayden, and he was diagnosed this year with auditory processing disorder, which I suspected from the time he was pretty little. Dad is dyslexic and I have dyscalculia, so there you go. My kiddos had something coming from both directions. My daughter is 15, and so I am in the thick of this homeschooling a teenager myself, which it's a lot of fun, and it's a blessing to be able to homeschool. Her name is Haley, and she doesn't mind me sharing. She's had some struggles along the way. I'm sure many parents can relate to this, where you'll have a child who has a lot of gaps, or there's this big discrepancy. They might be reading really high, but really struggling with math, or vice versa. So we had that going on, as well as some attention and some processing speed issues. So homeschooling has really been a good fit for her as a learner, because of course we're able to meet our kids where they are developmentally and teach them at a pace that's appropriate and modify curricula for them and accommodate them. So it's really been a blessing for her, and I've really seen that gap close over the years, and with her struggles, and just excited about what God has in store for her too, as a teen and as a learner, see where she'll go. So that's a little bit about me. my background is I have a bachelor's degree in education with a specialization in early childhood. And then I went on to, and I taught in the classroom, but then I went on to get a master's degree in reading. So I was a reading specialist, reading recovery trained. But I was always fascinated and always drawn to the children who were struggling the most in my classrooms. And so I went on to get an ILD training, the dyslexia training, cognitive therapy training, and worked in that field for a while as well. So it's kind of a hodgepodge there, but I still test on the side privately, and I'll do some tutoring from time to time with the dyslexia. But right now my big focus is my own children, and I love meeting other parents, and I love sharing and getting ideas and encouraging one another. And that's really one of the biggest blessings with getting to work for HSLDA and to work with homeschooling families, is because we're here to support and encourage one another and just share the love and share the wealth of knowledge. And everybody has different things that they've struggled with and different stories. We've all walked different paths. So I just think it's really great that what you all are doing at SPED Homeschool to serve families too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, we all work together, and there is no perfect way to homeschool. We all just learn our own way, and we, like you said, we gain wisdom from one another. Mm-hmm. And, you just use what works and what you've been given and what makes sense at the time. And definitely, and it's nice to also have people who have walked that road before you, just like people who call in to HSLDA, they find a lot of relief when they say, oh, you've been there, you've done that, your kids are a little further along. I remember just telling people they were so excited to hear my story on the other end, not so much the, wisdom that I had to share from books that I've read or anything like that. You give them hope. There's, your kids are going to make it. Right.
Well, we were talking earlier.
We were talking about that too.
Yeah, it's just really neat to hear other people's stories and their successes and how God's brought them through things. And so it's encouraging, definitely, to share with one another.
Yeah, definitely. So there are a lot of frequently asked questions about high school. And I know, having been a consultant in Minnesota and in Texas, I've heard them all too. And you almost feel like a broken record repeating yourself, but they are so important, and as parents look at homeschooling high school, these questions are critical to them not panicking, if they have the right answer and they're armed with the right information, and also to be able to plan out those 4 years accurately through high school. So I definitely want to answer the questions that you've given me, that you receive a lot, but also I want our viewers to know that you can write comments as we're going along. If there's something that you have as far as a question of homeschooling a teen with a disability, we want to hear that too. And we're going to just build that into our conversation as we're going along in the rest of our time. So
Great.
So the first question you had is, what will high school look like as far as classes and curricula for a struggling student in high school?
Right. And so we get this question a lot, is what curriculum will be a fit for, a child with ADHD, or what curriculum's going to work for? And, that's a loaded question, because what works for one child may not work for another. And, I think the key is to find something that you think is going to be a good fit for your child's learning preferences as well as their strengths, but something that's going to address their weak areas as well. And to not be afraid to modify things and change up how you're using it. There were a lot of workbooks we cut up she wasn't going to be writing in them with some of the dysgraphia stuff she had going on early on. So we did a lot of cut and paste and modify and making flip books and things like that with workbooks. So what does homeschool look, what does high school look like for a child who's struggling, a teen who's struggling? I mean, the one thing I always tell parents is high school doesn't have to be what your experience was. I think a lot of times we have to have a paradigm shift. I mean, I know I was public schooled. I don't know about you, Peggy, but
yep, I was.
Yeah. So we bring that in, that experience, that background knowledge, and we think, well, in high school, they have to take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry. They have to do X, Y, and Z, or so-and-so down the street, this is what their high school program looks like. Mm-hmm. And I just always tell parents, you have a lot of freedom and flexibility. In most states, there's not any mandatory specific graduation requirements. So parents, as the administrator of their school and the guidance counselor, they get to set forth what that high school program is going to look like based on their child's functioning levels, their capability, their post-secondary goals, their interests and passions. So you have a lot of freedom and flexibility, and we also can shift our mindset that high school has to be 4 years. For some students, they may finish earlier. They may work faster and, are gifted or twice exceptional student. They can, it doesn't have to be 4 years necessarily. For some students, high school may be 5. Lots of kids take a gap year. Public school students across the nation, if they have more severe needs, they're frequently staying in school longer to finish coursework.
21.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think parents need to realize that high school can look unique because each student is unique, and that's fine. So you have a lot of freedom and flexibility, and that's one of the things that we do. Our high school consultants and the special needs consultants is we'll help parents with program planning or picking courses that would be a good fit. And creative coursework, as I like to call it, you can be creative with your coursework.
Right. And, that, like you said, each child is unique. I love that. High school can look unique because each child is unique. And it doesn't, even when you are homeschooling multiple students with disabilities through high school, it's going to look completely different. I know I've graduated too, and one did unit studies all the way through. I mean, he was out in the driveway, measuring how long Noah's Ark actually was, and, all these things. And the second one, he was more into writing. So we just did more writing things that he could do and moved in more computer stuff and video and editing, all these other social media things, where his brother didn't do that. Mm-hmm. But yet they both got high school. Mm-hmm. So definitely, to think outside the box is
right,
great.
For sure. And don't be afraid to use curricula. For instance, I'll encourage families to don't stop using picture books and don't stop reading aloud just because your student's a teen, and maybe you want to give them audio assisted books and technology to help them be more independent, because obviously when they're teens, they don't want to be sitting next to mom or dad all the time. But oftentimes if the textbook is not within their grasp, then you can use the audio, or you can use maybe a lower level material or something that's high interest but easier readability for the student, and you can be eclectic with your materials to meet their needs. So those are just some thoughts about, I have tons of resource lists I can send families with some top picks of good curricula that, things that are more computer driven and DVD driven. Because I know for my daughter, she's definitely visual and auditory, but she likes computer learning as well. So that can be a good way to go for some kids. And also for mom and dad, I mean, we don't want to teach everything. I mean, I'm struggling to teach biology this year. I already told my daughter, I am not doing chemistry. I am not doing science again next year. But, outsource it. Use those DVDs, or maybe find an online class or a co-op where they'll offer some accommodations for your teen, and you can fit in the courses that you find daunting or you don't, necessarily want to teach too.
Right. And the curriculum options compared to when I started 15 years ago have exploded for special needs. And just, the ability, like you said, like audio versions of things or computer versions versus, there was a handful, and I always piece things together just to get by each year. But parents do have a lot of resources to be able to pull from. And even ones that aren't specifically meant for teaching homeschoolers, but are more bent on trades or to use with students, you can definitely adapt those to high school classes and think about those as high school material too.
Right.
So another question that I want to definitely get to is the question about a child who is behind or not on grade level. A lot of parents really struggle with, well, do I have to get them caught up? Or how do I assign credits for a class that a child isn't really doing at the grade level that their, I guess, typical learner would do?
Right.
And so how do you handle that question?
Well, I'll chime in and say my thoughts on that, and I'd love to hear, your opinions as well, because you've walked it and you've been doing this for a long time too. So we'll just bat these back and forth. But, one thing is that you don't have to think of, oh, well, my child is quote unquote behind, or they're not. Okay, so oftentimes parents, obviously we know if our child is not functioning at their chronological age or grade level, maybe where they quote unquote should be. But the most important thing is to meet them where they are developmentally. And and again, it's a paradigm shift. When I was teaching in public school, obviously you had to keep going, and you just keep chugging children along or passing them along, and that gap just got wider and wider and wider. Well, what we're seeing with children with special needs is they're actually outperforming. They're doing better than their public school peers. Now, why is that? Because you as the homeschooling parent are actually meeting them where they are developmentally, and you're teaching right there in that what's called the zone of proximal development. You're meeting them, you're coming alongside of them and mentoring them and coaching them, and you're just continuing to lift the level because you're meeting them where they are. So I think that we need to free ourselves up from that idea of, well, they're behind, so I can't give them credit. Well, you give them credit for the work they've done. And the other thing I'll always tell parents is, in public school classrooms across the nation, students are given a high school diploma and they're given credit for classes all the time, and they aren't on grade level. They'll graduate. Of course, if a student has an intellectual disability, if they can only do 5th grade skill work in math, then I'm not going to expect them to do geometry and calculus and trigonometry. I'm going to meet that student where he or she is and teach them the skills that they can do. And hopefully I just keep moving them along a continuum of things that are within their grasp, if that makes sense, if that's helpful. So you give them credit, you log the time, you keep record of your materials that you're using. And we tell families, if they have done 120 hours or more in a subject and they've met the requirements that you've set forth for that class, Be that, for one student, that may be this student is able to write 4 papers for this English class. But for another student, it might be this student is going to do 3 retellings or an oral presentation or a PowerPoint. So you set forth the requirements for the class, and once they've met your requirements and they've done 120 hours or more, or they've completed about 70-75% of a book or a group of materials that you've put together, then you give them the credit. You document what they've done and you give them the credit for that class.
Right.
So do you have thoughts on that you'd like to share? Or?
Well, that's similar to what we did. I found that some of the subjects it's easier to grade just because, they're multiple choice or whatever, but for my one son that did things in a more fluid manner, definitely putting together rubrics ahead of time to let him know too how he was going to be graded, whether it was, this I'm grading you on the amount of time you put into this, the attention that you give it, how hard you actually work on it. And so then they have expectations of what they're going to be graded on too. And it's easier for me to grade and not be as biased either when it comes to the end. And then I know for sure when I do give that grade on the transcript, it was the one that was deserved. And
yes. Absolutely. I love rubrics and checklists, and I think that's a fantastic way, particularly for kiddos who are struggling, that more authentic assessment. Rubrics and checklists are great. If folks watching don't know I don't want to assume anything. A rubric is just a rating scale. Typically, it's a 1 to a 5. 1 being the worst grade they can get, 5 being the best, but you set forth the criteria if you want to earn a score, for instance, for an oral presentation or a book report, then you set forth the criteria. If you do these things, you're going to earn this score. If you do these things, you'll earn. If you want to earn the best score, then you need to make sure your project or your paper has X, Y, and Z, and you give them the rubric and the expectations up front, and they set a goal.
Yeah, so there's no guesswork. And a lot of times for a child who struggles, that extra anxiety that is, well, am I going to do okay or not? Well, they'll know pretty much ahead of time whether they're going to do good or not by how much they've invested in it, and they've made sure that they've got all those check boxes ready to be checked. So,
yes. Yeah. That's a great tool for students for sure.
But yeah, and then giving credit. You can give credit for things that you don't consider school too, but that are learning. Because think about it, in high school, they take shop classes, they do child development. You have to think outside the box when it comes to classes in high school too. Like, we had talked previously about what their bent is. And that can be on their transcript too.
Right. So I'll piggyback on that and just share with folks, maybe this will help somebody and encourage somebody. But my daughter loves horseback riding. And so we wanted to line up some volunteer work experience for her. And she's very motivated. She's not a real motivated reader, but if I find things that are horse related or I find things that tie in with her love of animals, then she's more motivated, and motivation and interest is half the battle. So we actually gave her credit last year, and she'll get partial credit this year for equine studies. She volunteers at a therapeutic riding center for kids that have special needs. And then she also works at a little farm, helping with pony parties and feeding horses and grooming. And then I gave her some other things that she had to read and some projects to do. But we're pulling those experiences as well as the materials together for a half a credit for equine studies. So it's an elective. So tap into your kids' strengths and passions for sure.
Well, and two, they look forward to that class. So they're more likely to get through the stuff they don't want to do so that they can do that.
Exactly. That's a good motivator.
Use it as a motivator. You can use school as a motivator. So yeah, that's a nice thing about adding in those classes. So we've talked a little bit about transcripts. I'm going to have you talk a little bit more about that and just for those people who don't even know what a transcript is, what is it? How do you make a transcript for your student, and then why is it important?
Okay, so a transcript is really just a record. It obviously has the students, information on there, their name and date of birth, and possibly the name of your school. If you name your school, we've named ours Aspen Hill because that's the road we live on, Aspen Hill Academy. But it's just a record of the coursework. So it has the course title on there and the grade. Oftentimes parents and schools will list the grading scale is also on the transcript. And then, of course, they get a grade point average for each year, and then and you do a cumulative. Now, some people will do a transcript by year. Personally, I like a transcript by subject because oftentimes students take longer. For myself, because I struggled so much in school, school took longer. I wasn't able to carry a full course load, or it wasn't wise for me to carry a full course load. And we did summer school to get through the harder classes so I could just focus on the science and the math classes with just having that one class to focus on, which was helpful. So I like the transcript by subject. We have sample transcripts that we will give to folks. I have some ones that are specific for kids with special needs so they can see, this is an example of what high school looked like for a child with more severe intellectual disabilities, a student maybe with dyslexia that's going on to community college and then possibly transferring to university. So we have some different sample ones so that people can get an idea of coursework, but that's basically what it is. Now you do want to do course descriptions, but those would be separate. Those wouldn't be on your transcript. And sometimes HSLDA will recommend that families get their transcript notarized.
Notarized, yeah. It depends. Some states recommend it more than others, and I'm not exactly sure. I know we did for our oldest, and then we didn't for the second one. So
yeah, you can check your
states too. So
check your state requirements. It's it's not a necessity, but for whatever reason, sometimes when people see a document that's notarized, it's all of a sudden it's official.
Right.
Yeah. So
my biggest recommendation with transcripts and diplomas is make multiple copies and make sure you store them somewhere that's fire safe, because you have the only copy. And not a lot of people think about that until it's gone and you can't go to a school to get another copy of your student's transcript and diploma.
Good point.
So,
yeah, they're definitely needed. I mean, sometimes employers will want to see a transcript, not just the
and they go
diploma.
all the way back to high school, even if they've graduated from college. So yeah. And that's why it's also important too to join an organization like HSLDA and your state organizations, because a lot of employers will end up calling them to validate your homeschooling and whether it was legal or not. They just don't understand the homeschooling laws, and it's better to have said, I'm a member of HSLDA and they will back up my transcript because I homeschooled and I'm a member, and they do, because my son, when he transferred and went to welding school in Florida's state requirements where they have to have homeschooling hours. So they were looking at my transcript, looking for his school hours. Well, he graduated in Minnesota and they didn't require that. So I called up HSLDA and said, can you please work with these people? Because they don't understand the homeschooling law in Minnesota. And all I had to do was say that a lawyer from HSLDA will be talking to you. And they went, oh, then it's fine. So
yeah, throw out the term lawyer and yeah, that's helpful. But yeah, I mean, because it's different. It varies from state to state. And so, but I always tell parents too to keep record of your hours and attendance, whether or not it's required in your state. Just that way, should you encounter any difficulties or somebody's looking for it, then you have it in your own records. I'm a more is better person anyway. To kind of go above and beyond the requirement, just in case. So.
Yeah, just in case is very good. So, yes. So you touched on a little bit accommodations and modifications. And I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on that, because you said that you get asked about that in high school. And is that doing the work for my child or not? How do you handle that as in teaching your high school student and also preparing them for, I guess, being on their own too? How much do you accommodate and modify, and how do you balance that with
right? Yeah, and I mean that can be really tricky. But I mean, an accommodation, basically, I always tell parents to think of it as it's a workaround. It's a way to help get the information in. So if they're having, let's say, receptive language processing, or or obviously they have low vision and blindness or something, then they're going to have to take in information differently. So you have to accommodate for the disability. It's a workaround, or it's a workaround for output. So for a student with dysgraphia, they may not do well with a written essay test that's pencil paper, or or even a bubble test where they're having to transfer things, or a child with visual processing. So then we would want to give them a scribe, or we would want to allow them to mark answers in a test booklet and then have somebody else transfer. So an accommodation is really a workaround to take the information in or to output so they can show forth what they know. And then a modification is really if we are dramatically changing curriculum, if we're lowering expectations, if they're really working at a much lower grade level. So for instance, we've got a senior 17-year-old who's really functioning more like a fifth grader or something, then obviously they're going to be in material that's written at easier readability level, and we're not going to be expecting the same. So they're going to have a more modified curriculum, a more modified program. In terms of ways to accommodate in high school, oftentimes parents will say, well, what's allowable? And I mean, what's allowable is what is needed. I think we need to think about, how does the student's diagnosis or disability, whether it's been officially diagnosed or not, even if it's just been observed, how is that functionally impacting the student? So we want to make sure that we're giving them accommodations that are appropriate and that it levels the playing field for them to be able to participate and do their best, but it's not giving them an unfair advantage. So it might be an appropriate accommodation, for instance, for a student with dyslexia, for the parent or a proctor to read aloud the word problems on a test. Because what am I testing? I want to see that they can understand what function, what procedure, what operation in math needs to be done and solve the problem. It's not a reading test. So I can read aloud those word problems to the student, and then that's not going to change the efficacy or validity of what I'm assessing. But if I'm just reading aloud everything to the student and it's a reading test, then it's no longer really an effective reading test. It's just a comprehension test because they've heard it read aloud. So, but do you understand what I mean? So we have to be careful about
you have to think backwards as to what is the purpose of what I'm doing, and is my helping deterring the purpose?
Exactly. and I want to help them to be successful, but I also want it to be fair. And so for students with slow processing speed, or oftentimes for kids with dyslexia, they just need the gift of time. They just need extra time to read. Because, and my husband says this all the time, he'll say, I just need more time, because the first time I'm reading it, I'm just working through the words and I'm decoding it. And the second time I'm reading it faster. And then the third time I'm really thinking about what I'm reading.
Yeah.
So
that's usually the accommodations that they will give on most like ACT and SAT tests for students with those diagnoses, is extra time or quiet room without distractions, those types of things.
Right, or frequent breaks if they need frequent breaks. And that's the other thing you have to be careful for. If it's a student, let's say with attention issues, sometimes parents will think, well, I'm going to ask for extra time, and really that would not be helpful for that student to have to be there longer. They might do better with frequent breaks. That might be a more appropriate accommodation for them. So I always tell parents too, naturally we're accommodating our students at home, so keep a record of how you're accommodating them and think about that, and we want those things to follow them. So what's allowable is what's appropriate, but also if something's been recommended, if an accommodation's been recommended to you by a psychologist or an educational diagnostician or your pediatrician or medical person, then certainly it's appropriate, and you can ask for those things. If you have a standardized test requirement in your state at the end of each school year or certain school years, then go ahead and do those. Just make a note that you've done those. For instance, we use the CAT test at the end of every school year. And previously, I would have to give Haley accommodations, so I just made a note on it. And it didn't change her scoring or anything, but the test publisher needed to know that those accommodations were given. So I hope I answered your question. I'm kind of rambling there.
That's okay. No, it's important, like you said, for parents to document what they're doing, and not just to document it, but to realize you're doing it. Because so often we get so used to, like you said, we accommodate all the time. We forget we're doing it sometimes because we're so used to doing it for our student. And then when they're not with us anymore, they've lost their crutch too. They need to understand also what we're doing to help them so that they know what they need help for without us.
True. Right. And they need to learn how to advocate for themselves, which is really important, I think, during those middle school years and teen years, to teach self-advocacy skills, and for them to learn to feel comfortable to say, thankfully, I got to the point where I was comfortable enough to be able to go to my professors and say, I get extreme test anxiety when I'm in this huge hall with 100 students and everybody's finishing faster than me, and they're going, I'm sweating bullets because I'm still here having to work out everything. And so if I could just be tested in a smaller room or individually, and this test anxiety that often accompanies the learning disability would subside. And so kids need to feel comfortable to say, this is how I learn best. This is This is who I am as a learner and as a thinker. These are the things that are challenging for me, but I've noticed if I could have the handouts ahead of time, or if I could just have some extra time, that's really helpful for me. So they have to learn how to speak up for themselves and advocate.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So speaking of tests, what advice do you give? I know one of the questions you put about is the SAT and ACT test, the entrance test for college. What about preparing for college? Is it even possible? I guess that's a lot of questions in one, but a lot of parents kind of group all that together anyways, because they're like, well, my student can't take the test, so maybe they can't go to college, or I don't think they can handle the coursework. What accommodations or modifications will the school even allow?
Right. It's a big ball of wax. That's a lot to unpack.
It's huge.
Yeah. Well, let me say this. Don't rule college out. Okay. I had a mom who was like, you can do anything, all things were possible. We're not going to listen to the guidance counselor who said, don't even bother applying to college. You'll never make it. You're not college material. You're not smart enough. And my mom was like, absolutely not. We're not, so you don't rule it out. And, community college, trade schools, there's online school, more and more colleges and universities are having mentoring programs in place for students. And every college and university does have a special student services department. They may not call it that. Sometimes it's hard to find on their website. It may have some catchy name like Reach or Attain or, something. So do your homework and visit and ask questions. Don't rule it out,
Yeah.
And it's definitely possible, definitely too with accommodations and for them to advocate for themselves and getting some things in place for them, some support. They do have disability services at the colleges, but parents need to understand that, let's say your child has had an official plan, a 504 or an IEP formerly. Maybe they were public schooled and then brought home. None of those plans, even our accommodation plans that we offer in a homeschool setting, those things don't automatically follow the student. It falls on the student and or the parent to help advocate and to ask and then to, to try to work with their professors to get something in place. So colleges don't have to make an accommodation. They'll consider just about anything, but they don't have to, under the law, make or offer an accommodation that would alter the nature of a course of study or a program. And they're not mandated to provide like a personal assistant or special devices. Sometimes they will. So, okay, so refresh my memory here. So
I just wanted to add in too, as your child is getting closer to that end of high school, talk to colleges, because they are, like you said, they're so different. And, legally they don't have to do a lot of things, but they will do a lot of things and they will accommodate. And so talk to those colleges or junior colleges, tech schools ahead of time. Ask them, what are your requirements? What does my student need on their transcript? What do you require for an entrance exam? Do you even require the SAT or ACT? A lot of the colleges that are junior colleges or tech schools do not. They have an entrance exam that's unique to them, and your student can even go in and take it in multiple phases without even any paperwork saying that they need accommodations or modifications. So explore that with them ahead of time. That will reduce your anxiety greatly, and your students also, if they don't have to spend all that time preparing for those tests that they don't need. Because a lot of them, if they do adequate coursework at one of the junior colleges and then apply to a 4-year college, it's their coursework that they've done at the school that counts, not a test score that they took.
Right. Right. That's a really good point. And I also wanted to share with parents that there's a website. It's Fair Test, FAIR, fairtest.org, that lists the universities and colleges that do not require the ACT and the SAT. So you can find a listing. It's fairtest.org. And also LD Advisory is another good website, LD Advisory, for teens and for students, transitioning to go on to college. But I would say too that during the high school years, another way you can set your student up for success and how you can help them to be successful at a junior college or regular college, whatever they want to do post-secondary, is to start using assistive technology and to train them in how to use, certain software tools like Drag and Dictate or Kurzweil 3000, things like that have text to print, printed speech, or timers, or, teach them how to use a planner and set reminders on their phone or their iPad. And so those apps, different apps that, we have so many, there's an app for that. There's about an app for everything.
There's apps for everything, definitely.
Yeah. And so, too, for me with dyscalculia, it was helpful to be able to have a reference sheet or for formulas, or sometimes students can get use of a calculator so that if they were having trouble remembering formulas, things can be stored in the calculator. So those are just some ideas, but definitely tap into your assistive technology tools and teach them during their teen years, because that's going to help them be independent and successful. And those are tools that they can use forever as long as they need them.
Yeah, definitely. And they'll find them on their own too. If you give them a challenge, say, okay, I know you struggle with this, and kids can find so many things on the internet now that I can't find. So definitely. And they change so quickly too that, and maybe one technology you think would work good, they just don't like. So yeah, that's good.
Right.
The one question I want to make sure we touch on is diplomas. And how do you issue a homeschool diploma for a high school student?
Well, you have different options. So HSLDA's stance is that a parent-issued high school diploma is better than, for instance, a GED. Sometimes parents who have struggling kids, they'll say, I'm just going to have them take the GED. And that's not a diploma. It's a general equivalency development test. It's an assessment. And it basically shows that the student is functionally literate, that they can read and write and do math at about an 8th grade level. So, there's often a stigma that comes with the GED. It's still seen as like a dropout and, less than. So our stance is that if a parent can issue a general education, general studies, or a standard diploma, that would be, obviously there's different diploma options. Some kids are going to do just a general studies diploma, others maybe advanced placement, but for kids with more severe special needs, sometimes parents will choose to issue, let's say they keep schooling and this student is going to transition to some type of group home or living with a family member or always living, with the parents, then they may not really need a diploma. Maybe they get a certificate of completion or a certificate of achievement or something. In some states, the Department of Education, they have different diploma options. Obviously, some they'll call it a modified diploma or an applied studies diploma or an extended studies diploma. They have these names for them. And we tell parents, you can look at your state Department of Education and see the diploma options that public school students are doing and what those requirements are, and use that as a loose guide. I'm not saying adhere to that, but you could because, I mean, let's face it, oftentimes people are critical of homeschooling because they think that we have to do less than, or we're not regulated, or no, homeschoolers, I mean, the vast majority go above and beyond what public school students are doing. You know, even special needs students, I think you all do an amazing job. I always tell parents, homeschooling is an individualized education plan. It's an individualized, excellent education plan. So you have lots of options. It's just, you want to I always tell parents to start with the end in mind and work backwards. So think about, but you don't want to sell the child short either, you know? So my opinion is it's at least a standard general education diploma.
Yeah, I agree. For what your student, I mean, the diploma is not what most people look at. They look at the transcript. And so, you know, what your student does, did they meet your standards, you know, and what you required for high school for them. And if you do have state requirements, of course, you've got to make sure you follow those. But there's very few states that have requirements for graduation. They're basically left to the parent to define those, because you're like most private schools within every state. They do it the same way. So we often think that you got to get those 4 years of English and those 4 years of math and, you know, 3 years of science, however all that works. And for some students, and especially if they're college preparatory, that makes a lot of sense. But for other students, that doesn't.
Right. So for instance, my daughter, we're just going to do a general standard diploma because her plan is to do dual enrollment in community college and then, you know, and get an associate's degree. And she may go to a trade school. If she decides to go on to college, she could transfer. So, so I'm thinking with the end in mind and then picking the diploma and picking coursework. So I'm going to the community colleges and the technical schools and finding out, what would you like to see on that transcript? What is she going to need to have in order to apply here or get in? So we're working backwards.
Yeah, that's really the best way to do it. And you don't have to have, you know, the end in mind when you start.
That's true.
Have a goal. I sat in this guy's talk a couple years ago, and he helped parents with kids with disabilities, but mostly with finances. But he said something that really hit me, and I thought this really pertains a lot to high school, is that the first year you set a goal. You know, it's a goal. You may never end up at that goal, but at least you're going somewhere. And he said, and then you reevaluate, whether it's, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or a whole year down the road, what's your new goal? And head towards that. And it'll be refined through the process. And eventually you won't be going back and forth and all over the place. You'll be, methodically going in certain directions that'll eventually take you where your student is going. And
right. And they're making forward progress. That's exactly what we want. We want them making gains and making forward progress. I like that, to have a goal. And I mean, how many any student realistically knows what they want to do?
They don't.
And it changes.
No. It changes.
So this is also don't plan with this. Plan with this.
Yes, pencil. Definitely.
That happens. Yes, plan and pencil. Anyway, yeah. For sure.
No, totally agree. Well, we are almost at the end of our hour. I wanted to make sure to share some of the resources that you had given me. The first one is the Struggling Learner website. And let me put that up on there. So can you just give us a quick overview of what is on that HSLDA website?
Well, there's articles, there's newsletters, there's a national charitable organization listing. We have a find help tab, so we have a searchable database if families need to find in their state a certain, let's say they need a psychologist or maybe some type of therapist or a tutor. So we have that. We have, of course, their states. It says in my state, so they can click and see what, if any, special education services are available to them in their state as a homeschooler, because some parents want to tap into state or school services, so that we have information about testing. There's all kinds of goodies there, and you don't have to be a member to access a lot of what's posted there. So you'll want to take a look. That's some of what's there.
Yep. And then you have a podcast that you did, and it's a shorter version kind of what we talked about here tonight. So if people want to listen in on that, there's the link for that podcast. It's, but I think it's like 10 minutes long. It's pretty short. So
yeah, I think, well, it's a week. There's a week long. Each segment is 10 minutes, I think. So they can probably access that. Yeah.
Yep. And then you had passed along an article to me about creative coursework.
Yes.
For high school. I'm going to put that up there. And so that has some really good ideas on just thinking outside the box. I don't know. What else do you want to expand on that?
Well, in that article, too, there's a pretty lengthy list of some of my, I have a picture of it, but there's a pretty lengthy list of some of my top picks for curriculum,
right.
For different subjects and resources. So they might find that, encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. There's a lot of really good ones. We took a survey on our support group where this is broadcasting live right now, and we put that survey up on our website at spedhomeschool.com. And so you can find out what other parents thought were their top picks for high school too. We've got other by subject, but we just did high school also, because it's an animal of its own. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can be so creative. I did unit studies with one, and a little more traditional auditory schooling with the second, and so yeah, there's just lots of options. And then here is the special needs at hslda.org. It's your email.
Yes, ma'am. That's my email. If people want to email me, or do you want to email me and put in the subject line sample special needs transcripts, I'd be happy to email those off. Or if you have a question, if you're not a member, I'll answer your question because you were in on this session tonight. But I would, obviously love for you to join HSLDA. It's a great community, and it's really the model of the body, taking care of the body, and where all of us band together and they fight discrimination as well as advocacy for homeschoolers and fight to maintain our freedom to homeschool. So we appreciate all of our members, and we need your membership to continue the work that they do there. So yeah.
And that's at hslda.org. You have to find all of the resources, and you guys have a lot of them. So definitely get tapped in. I know we have a lot of links on our website too to your stuff. So
yes, and you have a great website too with lots of resources.
Yep. Yeah. We're working on improving that, but we just got started. So definitely that gets improved every day, it seems like. So all right. Well, we are out of time. I don't see any questions. So hopefully we answered all your questions while we were talking, because we filled up all our time with what we had. And thank you for sharing so much, Faith. It was
thank you.
Definitely good to talk about this stuff. It's, I know a lot of people think about these questions, but not often can they get them all answered in an hour. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to throw out there too, before everybody signs off, if you do have questions or you need help with navigating that application process for accommodations for the SAT or the ACT, that can be a daunting process, and I'm sure Peggy could help with that as well. But we're here to help with that. If you have further questions, sorry, I didn't get to take any questions tonight.
Yeah, no. Well, we got a thank you very much here. So that's
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So well, I just want to thank you for joining us, and thank you, Faith, for your time. I definitely have enjoyed this conversation we've had about homeschooling teens with disabilities, and definitely check out our website at spedhomeschool.com too. I have an article that I wrote a while ago about what to do if your student sidetracks your homeschool high school plan, because I had one of those. And so, you know, all those experiences we are sharing. So lots of information too on our YouTube channel. We have one whole set of videos that are just for high school, and so definitely tap into those. These videos go up on that YouTube channel too, as well as our podcast. We've just got a lot of resources coming out all the time, and definitely if you can help us with funding, that's something we need. So we've got donation buttons on our Facebook page as well as our website, and I'm going to be heading to Russia to train parents how to homeschool children with special needs there in May, and so that's like a mission trip. So definitely looking for some financial support in that area. So, but we're excited. So, yeah. All right. Well,
you'll be a blessing there.
Oh, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week. And until then, bye.